sounds to me when I listen to it as if I were someone who couldn't actually hold a job for any length of time. I appreciate the brevity. I really want to thank you for inviting me to this conference. It's a wonderful gathering of people who obviously care a great deal about aviation, and it's always a pleasure for me to talk to people who care and treat aviation with the passion that you have here. And I think it's incredibly appropriate that we gathered here in this building, and I had the occasion to spend some time here last evening. And this is, well, if you really love aviation, this building is like a cathedral. It is, you walk around and you see the remembrances of people who've done so much for aviation, have left their mark on aviation, like those of you here have left your mark on aviation, the things that you do, the changes that you propose, the procedures that we adopt. And it's a very appropriate place to do that. Aviation has been good to me. I think aviation has been good to all of you. If it wasn't good to us, we wouldn't be here. We'd be on a roster somewhere. But so it's a very appropriate setting to host such a conference, and I'm really pleased to be involved and to have been invited. I think it's also appropriate that we talk about international flight crew training. When we look at the advances that we've made in technology and all the things that we've done, one of the areas that really could stand to keep up with technology is in the flight crew training area. And it's clearly one of the bigger issues that's facing aviation safety professionals and regulators today. And it is also one of the most challenging things that I think we face today. Advances in technology and the meticulous investigation of accidents has given us the means and the data to design and fix many of yesterday's mechanical malfunctions, if you would, and we can take those malfunctions out of the safety equation. But it's a much more complex undertaking to design human error out of the system. The human element is a big challenge for all of us. It doesn't mean we can stop trying just because it's a challenge, far from it. I think you're aware that around the world, whether it be the FAA or any of the regulatory agencies around the world, safety is our #1 mission. It certainly is at the FAA. It's the #1 mission and our top priority. Addressing the human element in the chain of events that leads to an accident is one of the reasons that I have focused so intently on professionalism since my very first day as the FAA Administrator. But I have said it in the past, I will repeat it here for you. I wish it were possible that no matter how hard I try, no matter how hard any of us try, you are not going to be able to mandate professionalism. You simply can't regulate it. But there are certainly things that we can do in forms of education and a lot of other things, and that brings me to the theme of this conference, flight crew training standards. The key role for aviation regulators is to design policies, procedures, and regulations that will prevent as many errors as we can and mitigate the errors that do occur. We can find ways that minimize those errors. And of course, we still have to design and implement effective ways to flight train crews on all of those carefully designed procedures and regulations so that they actually operate along the lines that we've trained them toward. The best procedures in the world really aren't worth very much unless they're understood and implemented by the flight crews and followed all the time, not just when there's a check pilot on the jump seat, not when there's a FAA regulator or observer on the jump seat. We care more about what we do, we care more about what crews do when no one's watching. We know what they're going to do when we're watching. It's when we're not watching that we should be concerned about. One of the reasons that behind our FAA proposals for updating regulations of flight crew training started back in 2009. We issued a notice of proposed rulemaking to revise the existing regulations that we have regarding the qualifications, service, and use of crew member and aircraft dispatchers based on comments and findings that arose from a very tragic accident that happened in 2009, Colgan Air, Buffalo, New York. And that tragedy put a lot of light on some areas that we needed to really focus more upon. We decided to develop and publish a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking based on those findings. And our proposal that is out, the supplemental that was put out, would increase the normal, abnormal, and emergency tasks for training for the evaluation of each crew member. It also requires the pilot monitoring, in other words, the pilot not flying, to observe, assess, and inform other crew members on flight progression, systems, and situational awareness. But in plain English, we want people to speak up. Cockpit resource management has been an area of a lot of focus, and yet we continue to see accidents where the pilot not flying was completely aware that something was amiss, and for a variety of reasons failed to bring it to the attention of the pilot flying. It also changes the training and evaluation interval to 9 months. It establishes in that rule a baseline and minimum hours for the completion of various curricula that are involved. It permits credit for training, testing, recency experience, and operating experience based on the commonality of aircraft, systems design, and the handling characteristics of the airplanes involved. It establishes requirements and requalification training based on FAA guidance and standard industry practices today. It incorporates stall, upset recovery, and remedial training requirements that were mandated by Congress in those hearings that surrounded that tragedy up at Buffalo. It also requires training and evaluation in flight simulation training devices, that are known, as we love to use so many acronyms, the FSTD. On the subject of training devices, let me address a couple of the questions that we received at the FAA with regard to the ICAO document 9625, which is the criteria for the qualification of flight simulation training devices. First, let me say that we really appreciate the groundbreaking work that both ICAO and the Royal Aeronautical Society have done in developing this document to support both its principles and the standards that it contains. We share those principles and standards, and we're certain that they'll lead to significant improvements in simulator training worldwide. The FAA is working very hard to adopt those principles and standards. The time frame for adaptation, however, is the challenge. The magnitude of the items that are set forth in 9625 is not insignificant, and it will require a substantial amount of rulemaking within the FAA. As you probably know, the FAA's ability or capacity to develop rules is somewhat constrained, and currently priorities have been driven by requests from Congress and things that they have mandated us to do in the Airline Safety and FAA Extension Act that occurred back in 2010. So while we have a challenge of the resources available, we are committed to proceeding with that rulemaking. So we're not only looking to the adoption of the principles and standards of 9625, but we're also looking to the manner of all new technologies and new methodologies for improved flight crew training. One of the difficulties that I think we all face is this is not a static environment. And as we adopt and make rules and procedures and regulations, technology continues to move forward. And it's a challenge for us to decide where to draw the line, say this is where we make the regulation, knowing full well that 1 or 2 years from now we may well have a better procedure. We may in fact have a new technology that allows for better training. I am especially encouraged by the proliferation of today's simulators and training devices, and that would include the appropriate use of the less costly non-motion devices. These are very useful for sophisticated scenario training and checking. I can tell you that I remember very well from my days as an airline pilot, there is no limit to the benefits that are derived from using simulation technology to experience, to train, and have put forward in front of you events that you could never perform safely in a real aircraft. As I already mentioned, the Airline Safety Bill was enacted last year, and it was intended to address issues that came from the 2009 Colgan Air accident. And since a number of those issues and those requirements are directly related to crew training, I thought it might be helpful if I offered to you a brief summary of the progress that we've made in the FAA in implementing this legislation. To start with, the qualification, service, and use of crew members and aircraft dispatchers. We're just beginning to review the comments that came to our most recent proposal. As you can imagine, the regime, the process that we go through in order to have a rule is one that is somewhat time intensive, because it has mandated into it appropriate periods where we put forward a proposal, and then we are open for public comment to those proposals for at least 90-day period, sometimes more upon request. Then we have to digest those comments, put them back into a rule that becomes the final rule and published. So it does take us some time. We're at the point there where we're reviewing the comments. Flight duty and rest. We proposed a rule last year. We're working diligently to publish a final rule. I would tell you that of all the regulations that I've heard put forward for comment, I don't know of any brought forward more comments back. I think we had over 8,000 comments on one regulation. Again, by law, we have to consider every comment made. Currently, that rule is in front of our government's executive review process, and I hope that we'll have that as a final fairly soon. Training hours requirement review. The Aviation Rulemaking Committee, ARC as we call them, presented its final report and recommendations to the FAA on May 23rd. Many of its recommendations have already been addressed in other projects. Again, we're reviewing the balance, and we'll put forward a notice of proposed rules if we find an area that is not already covered. Stick pusher and adverse weather training, event training. Again, we received the Aviation Rulemaking Committee's final report and their recommendations back in July of this year. We're going to prepare a report. All that's called for is a report to our Congress, and that should be published in November. First officer qualification and upgrade to airline transport pilot requirements, ATP in the U.S. We're working on a draft notice of proposed rulemaking based on the recommendations, again, from the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, which we have convened for this subject. In addition to the obvious safety reasons for the improved flight crew training, the FAA recognizes very much the importance of keeping our crews up to date and ready to work in the context of changes arising from the NextGen air transportation system. And through NextGen, which we all know will be a transformational change to how we operate in our respective airspace systems. But as we go through this transformation, which is taking the entire aviation system, transitioning the technology, how we operate, how we're surveilled, how we're separated, all of those components will be different. And it's going to change the leadership and overall philosophy of how we safely move and separate aircraft and the system going forward. But it's also one of the ways to dramatically improve both safety and efficiency in our systems globally. This is very important. Aviation plays such a key role to the overall global economy. It's very important that we achieve this change seamlessly and efficiently in order to capture the benefits. We've got a clear vision where we want to go for the next 15 years, and we have been very hard at work laying the foundation for that future today, being able to adopt those changes and bring them into our systems. Now, a lot of people seem to think that NextGen is something way off in the distant future. A lot of the lay personnel that I talk with think that NextGen is something that we have designed in a big room, and at some point in time we're going to turn on a switch. NextGen will happen. Well, I'd like to tell you that NextGen is here and in use today. It's an incremental advance. The way that we're deploying NextGen in the United States is a very efficient, methodical way where we test, implement, design, and get the feedback in a variety of areas around our country that I'll talk a little bit about. That technology is already taking us to the next level of safety and the next level of efficiency. It's also helping us to make aviation a lot more friendly to the environment. We've got a lot of very tangible examples today of where we have deployed NextGen technology, and we increase the use of our automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, or ADSB, and it's paying off in terms of safety, efficiency, and situational awareness. Airlines are benefiting from the expanding number, and we have a number of examples around the country where we have performance-based navigation procedures in use today, producing the benefits that we hoped and designed into the system. And I can tell you the feedback and the quantification of those procedures is real. The savings are real. The time savings are real. The fuel savings are real. The reduction of emissions are real. Today we have deployed ADS-B in the Gulf of Mexico on oil rigs. 250,000 square miles of airspace in the United States that has no radar. People say, well, it's just over the Gulf of Mexico. Well, there's 3,800 oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, and every day, every single day, 10,000 people off of those rigs back and forth on the mainland. Over 50,000 people work on those rigs. And every day we transport 10,000 of them safely. Each flight now, each helicopter flight, is reporting fuel savings of up to 100 pounds per flight. You're saving anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes per helicopter flight based on the use of ADS-B and GPS type of navigation. We have other situations. We have greener skies in Seattle where all the aircraft that are properly equipped can make optimized profile descents. I think those of you in the room, the aviators, know that that's the computation of the most efficient descent, so that you descend all the way from cruise altitude to your final approach fix with the throttles at idle. And Alaska Airlines reports they're saving 60 gallons of fuel per arrival. Paying $2.50 a gallon, 60 gallons of fuel savings every single flight is substantial, but the carbon emissions savings is even more incredible. And the number of flights using, we did a computation, and it's the equivalent of taking 4,500 cars off the streets of Seattle, just the fuel savings from one airline. That's a remarkable change. So we're looking forward to continuing the deployment of this technology, the efficiencies and the time savings, not to mention time, crew time savings. Communities all around, as I mentioned, are benefiting from reduced emissions and noise. In short, we're all recognizing the benefits and enjoying the benefits that these procedures and equipment brings us. So I'm excited about the progress we're making in NextGen and our mutual efforts to ensure that aviation and using this technology around the world advances in a very seamless and, more importantly, an interoperable fashion. So again, let me close by thanking you. It has truly been an honor to even speak in this building and be with a crowd that I know has such a passion for aviation. I look forward to hearing the rest of our speakers today. Thank you very much.